The truth hit Grace like a wave crashing against rocks. The frail old man she had helped on the train, the one she thought was just another lost soul on a journey, was not just anyone. Liam Choi, the elderly stranger who had appeared so fragile and harmless, was in fact the hidden patriarch of Han Global, South Korea's most influential and secretive conglomerate, and his disappearance had set the country into a panic. Grace, in her naivety, had done what she thought was simply a kind deed. She had covered his train ticket, helped him settle in, and offered him some small comfort in a world that often seemed indifferent to the elderly. But now, everything has changed. But hey, before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you won't miss out on more intense stories like this. Stick with us to the end. I promise you won't want to miss what's coming. She sat in the back of a sleek black sedan, the city lights of Seoul stretching out before her like a labyrinth she couldn't hope to navigate. The driver, silent and impersonal, passed through streets she didn't recognize, her heart a heavy thrum in her chest. As the car took her further into the unknown, she glanced down at the envelope in her lap. It had been handed to her by one of Liam's men, a token of gratitude, they said, but it was more than that. Inside, there were no pleasantries. Just a single line written in bold, dark ink. You are now tied to the fate of Han Global, and to a legacy you don't understand. Her mind raced. She hadn't known then, when she helped him, that her simple act of kindness had now bound her to this world, a world of power, influence, and high stakes. She hadn't expected to be sitting in this car, not knowing where it was taking her, her life turned upside down by the truth of who Liam really was. The door of the car clicked open, and the driver gestured for her to step out. She glanced at him, her nerves on edge. "Where are we?" she asked, the words sounding foreign in her own mouth. "This way, Miss Mitchell," the driver said with a bow, his tone respectful yet distant. She stepped out, feeling the weight of the night air surrounding her as she followed the driver into a grand estate that seemed to rise out of nowhere, its massive walls reflecting the dim glow of the streetlights. She had no idea what she was walking into. The enormity of it all crashed down on her as the towering gates slowly closed behind her. This was no longer just about helping a stranger. It was about her place in a story she never asked to be a part of. She stepped into the entrance of the mansion, where marble floors gleamed beneath the soft lighting, and the air smelled faintly of fresh flowers and something old, like forgotten memories. The driver led her into a grand hall, where a man in his early 30s waited. He stood with the kind of presence that filled the room, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. His sharp suit and cool demeanor only added to his imposing presence. "Miss Mitchell," he said in perfect English, his eyes scanning her with a sharpness that made her uneasy. "I assume you've already met my father." Grace nodded, unsure how to react. She had no idea what to expect. All she knew was that everything had changed in an instant. She was no longer just a traveler on a train, helping an elderly man with a ticket. She was now tangled in the complex web of one of the most powerful families in South Korea. "Please, allow me to introduce myself," he continued. "I'm Gio Choi, CEO of Han Global." His words hung in the air, each one carrying the weight of years of expectation and control. Grace felt a tight knot form in her stomach. The name Han Global was known worldwide, and the power behind it was as invisible as it was vast. She had been unknowingly thrust into the heart of it all. What had she done? "I'm sure you're wondering why you're here," Gio said, his gaze intense, probing. "My father is not as simple as he may have appeared on the train. He's been a leader, a man who's built an empire. But more than that, he's my father. And you've changed something in him." His voice softened slightly. "He hasn't smiled in years. Not like that." Grace could feel the tension rising between them. She had no desire to be a part of their world, but her presence here was undeniable. She had no choice but to face the reality of what she had stepped into. "I didn't do it for any reason other than to help," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. He needed help. That's all. Jiho didn't respond immediately. He studied her, his eyes narrowing slightly before he nodded, almost imperceptibly. I understand, he said, his voice cool. But this is more than just a simple act of kindness. You've caught my father's attention. And that, Miss Mitchell, is something that's not easily forgotten. Grace didn't know what to say. She felt as if she had entered a world she couldn't possibly understand, a place where everything was calculated and measured, where one wrong move could have catastrophic consequences. And yet, here she was, tangled in it all. I didn't mean to be a part of this, she said softly, but Jiho's response was swift, almost dismissive. You already are, he replied, and now we must figure out what comes next. The night stretched on as Grace was shown to her room, a luxurious suite in a mansion that seemed to have no end. She stared out the window, trying to process everything. What had started as a simple kindness had opened the door to a world of secrets, power struggles, and hidden agendas. And somehow, she was now a part of it. As she lay in bed, her thoughts swirling, she couldn't help but wonder if she had made the right choice in helping that man. What was it about him that had drawn her in so completely? Was it fate or something else, something deeper? The phone on her bedside table buzzed, jolting her from her thoughts. It was a message from an unknown number. You're not just helping an old man. You're about to change everything.
The message sent a chill down her spine. Grace couldn't shake the unease that had settled deep in her stomach. The message lingered in her thoughts as she drifted off to sleep, unanswered questions swirling around her mind like an unrelenting storm. The next morning, a sense of foreboding hung over the mansion like a heavy fog. After a night of restless sleep, Grace made her way downstairs, the grandeur of the mansion stark against the quiet emptiness she felt inside. The sprawling corridors and high ceilings, the artwork on every wall, everything felt foreign to her, as if she didn't belong. When she entered the grand dining room, Gio was already seated at the long table, a stark contrast to his usual composed demeanor. He was reviewing documents, papers spread out before him. There was no warmth in the room, only the sound of quiet clicks from his laptop and the rustling of papers. Good morning, she said softly, not sure of how to approach him. He looked up, his expression cold yet composed as always. You're early, he remarked, his tone clipped but not unkind. I suppose you're wondering why you're here. Grace nodded, unsure of how to voice the 1,000 questions on her mind. I don't belong here. I didn't come here for any of this. You do belong here now, Gio said matter-of-factly. Once you helped my father, you became part of something bigger than yourself. Whether you like it or not, you're tied to us now. His words felt like an anchor dragging her down into deeper waters. She had no choice but to accept the reality of her situation, but she wasn't going to let herself be swallowed by it. Not yet. You still haven't told me what this is all about, she replied, her voice steady despite the growing anxiety. Jiho sighed, setting aside the papers and turning his attention fully to her. My father, he's not just an old man with a heart full of regrets. He's the head of Han Global, a conglomerate that controls industries from technology to entertainment. His legacy isn't something we can just ignore. When he disappeared, we feared the worst. He's always been more than just a businessman. He's been a symbol of stability for so many. But he's still just a man, Grace countered, frustration creeping into her voice. A man who got on a train and needed help. I didn't do this for him. I did it because I've been there, because I understand. Jiho studied her for a long moment, his sharp eyes seemingly dissecting her every word. You think I don't understand? He asked quietly, his tone softening. I spent years under the shadow of my father's empire. It's not just a company, it's a part of me. Everything he built, I'm expected to maintain.
Grace didn't respond immediately, unsure of what to say. She had never been surrounded by such wealth, such power. Everything felt insurmountable. "Let me tell you something about my father," Jiho continued. "He's not just a businessman. He's a man who's carried the weight of a nation on his shoulders. The expectations, the sacrifice, it's all been too much for him. And now I have to carry it. But I've forgotten what it means to be human in all of it." He stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor, and Grace watched as he paced the room, the energy in him shifting between tension and exhaustion.
"You know what my father told me before he left?" Jiho's voice was low, bitter. "He said I was too cold, too focused on the empire. He said I didn't know how to love, and I didn't know how to tell him that I was afraid of losing everything he built, afraid of being the one to tear it down." Grace watched him, her heart beginning to soften. She had seen that same fear in her own life, fearing abandonment, fearing being forgotten, or worse, never having a chance to truly live. It wasn't easy, but it was familiar. "That's why I need you, Grace," Jiho said, his voice quieter now, but urgent. "I need you to help my father, to help me. I need you to remind us of what's real, what matters, because right now, I can't even remember what I'm fighting for anymore." Grace stared at Jiho, a mixture of emotions swirling inside her, empathy, confusion, and something else she couldn't quite place. How had a simple act of kindness led her into this? What was she supposed to do now? She took a deep breath, making a decision. "I didn't ask for any of this, but I'm not going to walk away either. I'll help you, but only if it's real. No more pretending." Jiho nodded slowly, as if weighing her words. "It's real, Grace. You've already changed things by being here, but we can't do it alone." The sound of a phone ringing broke the moment. Jiho answered it quickly, his demeanor shifting back to the cold, controlled CEO that Grace had first met. "Good," he said sharply into the phone. "I'll be there in an hour." He hung up without another word, turning back to Grace. "There's a board meeting. I need you to come with me." She blinked, caught off guard. "Me? I don't even know what I'm doing here." "You're not just a charity case, Grace," Jiho said, his eyes narrowing. "You're part of this now. You helped my father. You have a place in this company, whether you like it or not." She wanted to protest, to tell him she wasn't ready for this world, but the look in his eyes silenced her. She was already in too deep. There was no going back now. The boardroom was filled with the usual power players, shrewd businessmen and women who could make or break lives with a single decision. They barely glanced at Grace as she entered, but the tension in the room was palpable. They didn't like surprises, and Grace was the biggest surprise of all. Jiho stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding, his voice steady. "This is Grace Mitchell," he announced to the room. "She's here to stay. She's part of this family now." The board members exchanged uncertain glances, clearly uncomfortable. One man, his face sharp and lined with experience, cleared his throat. "And what exactly is her role here, Jiho?" "She's here to help us remember what matters," Jiho said simply. "She's not just an outsider. She's someone who knows what it means to be lost." Grace's heart pounded in her chest, the weight of their gazes heavy upon her. She wasn't sure what role she could possibly play in this empire, but something inside her told her that this was just the beginning.